Okay, well, it's 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so I'm going to get started right away. This is James Gerda speaking, President of Web Presented. I'm sure those of you on the call, our paths have crossed before. This webinar is specially invited to all of Web Presented's customers, and we're planning on doing this type of thing relatively infrequently. But every now and then it comes up. We work with another partner with a product or an enhancement to our system that we feel is truly of value and could be of value to our existing customers. So in the last several months, we've been working with a company by the name of SPARXiQ, who is a pricing optimization and pricing intelligence organization that works with several distributors and manufacturers. And we've invited them to join us today to talk a little bit about the partnership that our two organizations have created and the product that we've built together. The product is a combination of both of the strengths of our organizations. Web Presented prides ourselves in delivering a very robust, easy to use CRM and quote management tool that delivers value to salespeople, value to sales organizations, and creates efficiencies within organizations. I'm joined today by Greg Smith from SPARXiQ, and Greg is going to talk to you about their company, about their product, and then after Greg's introduced the value that SPARXiQ brings, we're going to show you a live demo of our two products working synergistically together. So from Web Presented's point of view, SPARXiQ are a fantastic organization to work with. We share a lot of common goals. Web Presented and SPARXiQ both are very much customer focused. We pride ourselves on being able to consultatively help customers navigate through the distribution space, as well as a keen eye for helping users with very user-friendly and highly efficient software capabilities. So, Greg, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you so you can introduce your organization and tell the attendees a little bit about the project that we've been working on.
Great. Well, thank you, James. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. My name, again, is Greg Smith. I'm VP of Strategic Accounts and Partnerships at SPARXiQ. And essentially what we want to do today is kind of walk us all through the concepts behind the SPARXiQ price banding, as well as some of the high-level benefits of our price bands working in concert with Web Presented quoting module, as James has outlined. And also, as James said, we're going to run through a quick demo with a tool. Just to kind of piggyback on what James said, we value our relationship with Web Presented. We are very choosy about our strategic partners, and we want to make sure that we align very well with them, not just from a complementary business perspective, but also from a I guess cohesiveness and a cultural aspect. The many benefits that we have together, that we share together, is the need for and a desire, if you will, of customer success and providing insights, guidance, and tools that enhance our customer success and almost to a certain degree, I guess, guarantee it. So again, thanks again for joining it. So a little bit about SPARXiQ. Formerly known as SPA, which was Strategic Pricing Associates. We've been around for the last 26 years. I'd say about 8 months ago or so, we decided to rebrand our company from SPA to SPARXiQ. The question I get a lot is, why did we do that? So, again, over the last 26 years, we've been focusing mostly on strategic pricing, with the exception of the last 5 years or so. We were offering our own, what we call a world-class skills-based online training. And then through acquisitions and strategic partnerships like Represented, we realized, again, over the last 8 months or so, that SPA was not accurately describing our current business model. So today we're about intelligent sales and profit acceleration. And if you look across all businesses, what they need is certain key insights and analytics to help them do their jobs better. SPARXiQ is about the combination of analytical insights and skills-based training, which help companies make better decisions to optimize their pricing, sales, revenue, and profitability. So it's no longer about just pricing. It's now really, as we look at businesses, we can touch every aspect of their business and really dive in and understand what's working, what isn't working, then how can we help them at the end of the day be more profitable, right? So we kind of represent that intersection of analytics and training, which combined accelerate what we call the modern business performance. And doing business today is far different than doing business, you can even say now as little as 3 months ago, but certainly even 5 years ago and 10 years ago as you look at the industrial B2B marketplace. And as you can see by the slide, we've worked with well over 500 different distribution businesses now in all different verticals, all different sizes. We've worked with well over 200 different manufacturing businesses. But the unique thing about that is that we work both sides of the channel. So we understand the distribution industrial B2B channel very well. And because of that, or I say, because of the insights that we derive from working both sides of the channels, we really are able to help our clients provide better outcomes. In my history, prior to joining SPARXiQ, I spent over 30 years in industrial B2B as an electrical distributor in either C-level or senior level position. So I've had the honor of working with lots of folks and pricing folks and marketing folks, and so I understand a lot of the pain points that you all experience on a day in and day out basis. And so today we're going to really focus on the quoting process as relates to the day-to-day quoting and how the Represented quoting module works with our price banding to provide a better outcome. So next slide. Great. So, whoops, there should be another slide there. I think you skipped a couple, James. I think. Nope, we get to the next one. Okay, that's fine. So what we're going to see here is, so essentially price bands targets the existing challenges and obstacles companies face today regarding pricing. So we're going to talk about some of those challenges that you can see here on the screen. And what I'll also say is that most quoting systems, right, most ERP quoting systems don't provide intelligence that support the pricing recommendations. And therefore, a lot of salespeople don't trust the pricing that's in their ERP systems or that gets presented to them either at order entry or at quoting, specifically at quoting, because they treat quoting differently, even if it's small quantity quoting. And I think what we need to all understand is that when we talk about quoting, we're not really talking about the $500,000 quotes, the $250,000 quotes, the really large quotations. That's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is day in and day out quote processing. 2 of these, 5 of these, 10 of these, 100 of these, that kind of stuff. That's really what we're trying to focus on here. And even at that level, a lot of times salespeople don't have trust or believe in because they think it's a bit of Oz behind a screen telling them what the price should be. So in order to get greater adoption, they have to understand and they have to believe in the pricing and how it's presented to them and why it's presented to them as part of that quote process. And that's what we're going to go through today. So essentially our system provides real-time price recommendations based on customer and product information, taking the guesswork out of pricing. So as we look about these challenges here, is how can we optimize pricing to drive greater profitability, both in CSP, which is customer-specific pricing, in exception pricing, and in override pricing methods, right? And then also, how can my organization move away from cost plus, which we're going to talk about more detail here later on, to an optimized market-based pricing architecture, because historically, when sales reps enter quotations, it's really about cost plus in most environments, not all verticals, but in most environments, it's really about cost plus. And it's also about gross margin percent, which again, I'll talk about a little later on, both of which are really bad foundations for building quotations. And then how can I streamline the quoting process so that the sales rep doesn't have to go to 2 or 3 different places to, number one, get information, but also 2 or 3 places to get approval for the quote that they're about ready to present to the customer, right? So all those are current challenges within the quoting system. And then what the SPARXiQ web-presented price bands that works within that quoting module does is address all those and then many, many. Right, so it deploys real-time pricing guidelines. It provides detailed contextual information that support that pricing. And we talked about that. We're going to talk about price bands are embedded in the quoting module, which we'll see here shortly, and it's integrated into the ERP integration. So as you can see here, we just have to list 3 challenges. There are a dozen more. And then those solutions that kind of address those challenges, and again, many, many more. So next slide. So let's look at the reality of most salespeople as they quote today. So as I kind of said before, they may have to go to 3 different places to find pricing information. That's numerous calls made to branch managers or perhaps their sales leader, perhaps to the outside salesperson, whatever it may be. A lot of wasted effort and time in order to approve or to get guidance on how should I price this particular product or how should I price this specific customer. And what Price Bands does, it provides the analytics and price parameters on the spot dynamically, making the quoting process way more efficient. And I'll also say here, and you'll hear me mention this throughout the presentation, that commissions should be intrinsically tied to this process, which helps salespeople make the right decision, right? And we also believe that salespeople want to make the right decision, right? They don't want to automatically go to the lowest price. They really don't. They don't automatically want to drop the price. That is the case when they don't have the right tools, they don't have the right information, they don't have the right knowledge, perhaps commissions aren't aligned correctly, and when they feel as though they don't trust the price recommendations. When all those things happen, then salespeople will go to the path of least resistance with a customer, which is, where do you need me to be, right? Which is the worst words that a salesperson should ever use, but that happens. And ultimately, that's what happens when they don't have any of that proper information. Next slide, please, James. So here, what we see on the screen is kind of a snapshot of what you're going to see in the demo, right? And so price bands reflects a competitive yet profitable price range for that particular product to that particular customer based on a statistical analysis of the transaction history of similar customers who purchase similar products. So the red price defines the bottom range of the price band and represents the minimum price that should be offered on the transaction. Any discounting below that price would result in money left on the table and quite possibly money lost, right? In other words, turning that invoice or turning that line item transaction into a money loser. And we know from analyzing thousands of distributors that somewhere between 60 and 70% of all invoices are money losers. Let me say that again. 60 to 70% of most industrial B2B distributor invoices are money losers. In other words, the gross margin dollars on that particular invoice is less than what it needs to cover the cost. And that's a shocking number. And so what Price Bands does, it starts to correct that, right? And what we call the whale curve, it starts to correct that whale curve as relates to pricing and invoicing, right? So The yellow price represents a more profitable price point that will still be competitive in the vast majority of scenarios. And finally, the green price represents the preferred price level for the transaction, one that satisfies the profitability targets of the organization while still being able to, you know, still being able to make the sale, if you will, right? So it's green pricing. It's still a good price. It still should be good 80% of the time in the marketplace to that customer for that specific volume amount. So it still should be good. And again, in the vast majority of the time, that is the right targeted price for that application. So then next to each of these price points, the projected sales commission rate for the line item is shown, as in the break-even volume threshold also, which is a key. We're going to talk a lot more about the break-even. I know it's a bit of an eye chart, but if you look there, it does say what's the percentage of increase that you have to sell for break-even. That's all calculated in gross margin dollars, right? So that's also there. And we're going to talk about that in greater detail here later on. Any of the three price levels can be selected for the item with the click of a button, or the user, you can manually enter your own price. You can go to a margin percent, which I really try to get people to shy away from, as James will kind of walk through in the demo. There's lots of flexibility in terms of how you structure with settings and parameters and user authorizations and all that stuff. You can pretty much set this up any way you want. We obviously would have some encouragement. We would give you some encouragement about how to set it up, but it's really up to you internally in terms of what you want to do. And then finally, relevant information about the customer and product, such as the item sensitivity rating or core status, is visible. Again, that helps provide guidance to the salesperson, and information that feeds the pricing, and gives them comfort, but hey, this is a good price, and here's kind of the reason why, right? Customer's historical price level or haggle index. So if you know that the customer always haggles, negotiation 101, what should you do? Start higher, because you know he's going to haggle with you. If you have a customer that always says, hey, I need an extra 5 on this order, and every single time you ask for an extra 5, start an extra 10. That way, when you give them the extra 5, you're still going to end up with a 5 extra. Right. So this gives you the information, the insights for the sales team to be able to understand that and know that rather than have to remember it, especially if this isn't his customer. The salesperson's out for a week on vacation, whatever the case may be, and you're actually providing a quote to a customer that's not yours. Great information for you to understand. Right? So I mean, again, a lot of this information is that contextual context that I'm going to talk about a little later on. And then again, once the price is selected, entered, clicking the save button adds the product to the cart at the chosen price. So again, pretty standard. And again, we're going to walk through that. Next slide, please, James. So we're going to talk about these. These are three main concepts that we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail. You know, price banding as a concept, break even, that concept and how that's important. And then contextualized guidance, which again, I've been alluding to in the previous slides. We're going to get a little bit more meat into those three, because those are really, I guess for lack of a better way to describe it, really the meat and potatoes of price banding and why it's important and how it works and what the end result is, and what we're going to do. So, next slide, please, James. So let's talk about price banding. You know, you can read what's on the screen. I don't need to reread that for you. It's a statistical technique, absolutely. But ultimately what it does is it helps your sales organization grow revenues and margin and top line while streamlining the quoting and order entry process. That's essentially what it does, right? It provides your sales reps with pricing intelligence, cross-sell recommendations, and negotiation guidance, all in one application, all while they're entering the quote. Nobody else does that. It's not part of your ERP system, and they would have to go to several different data points, different places to get all that information, which would take making a quote, you know, a 10-line quote in Representative's quote entry takes them 4 minutes, including making the right pricing decisions. And if you really took and tried to grab all the information that we show within that quoting module, go grab that information, apply it, and then make a pricing decision, it would take an hour to do a timeline quote at the very least, right? So we take that, boil it down, and provide everything that's right there. So utilizing the price banding methodology deploys a more accurate target price, which limits the ability of salespeople to negotiate prices to the same degree as they did before. Instead, the pricing policy delivers them a realistic, I would say accurate target price, and sales must be accountable for hitting that target price, or at the very least hitting a margin dollar amount. That's the other component of this. It gives you some reporting and quickly and easily be able to identify on a quote, did they use green, yellow, or red? Instead of just looking at the quote and saying, well, here's the sale price they used. I wonder if they deviated from the target price or not. Well, you can easily identify if they did and where did they. And if everything is all red, even though you might have some what we call non-core D items in there, there's some low visibility items of low sensitivity, as well as some high visibility items with high sensitivity, then you know there's some behavioral and cultural changes and discussions that need to occur. All right, so it gives you all that ability to identify, and you start to change culture and change behavior. Doesn't need to happen overnight, but as you start using the tool and as you start seeing behaviors, it gives you the ability to quickly and easily identify those behaviors and the ability then to start changing some of those behaviors. Next slide, please, James. So the next of this is the concept of break even. So this is very, very powerful. So we've been doing this for 26 plus years. We get a lot of data. And here's what we know is that 60 to 70% of buyers have been trained in negotiation. What we also know is that less than 20% of salespeople have been trained in negotiations. So when you add all the pressures that a salesperson has to go through on a day-to-day, quote-to-quote, conversation basis, on top of the fact that buyers have been trained in negotiations, they've been trained in the 18 tactics that they'd love to use against our sellers, it makes for a very difficult scenario for salespeople. So part of how we start to address this is what we call the break-even concept. So we understand that sales teams must be equipped with resources and data to negotiate with these customers. So price banding guides salespeople with immediate break-even calculation information that is valuable to negotiate better terms of trade during the quoting process. By providing break-even calculations and price banding, we train the sales team on how to negotiate better terms of trade, essentially. So here's an example of how that can be used, right? So it's inside salesperson, outside salesperson, doesn't matter. He's on the phone with a customer. The customer wants to buy 100 widgets, right? But he wants to buy those 100 widgets at whatever the price is, which perhaps maybe is yellow banding price or thereabouts. But in doing that, as the salesperson is entering the quote, he can see that, hey, what he's seeing on the screen is that in order to do that, he's got to get an increase of 50% greater volume to equal the same gross margin dollars. That is displayed on the screen. So he's having these conversations either at that point or perhaps afterwards, and as he's putting in the quote, and he's having a conversation with the customer before he sends the quote. And he's got the knowledge to go back to the customer and say, hey, I really would like to honor your pricing. Oh, by the way, I can. But in order to do that, instead of buying 100, I need to have you buy 200. Not 150, but 200. He goes back to the customer and says, hey, I'm going to buy 200, and I can absolutely guarantee you that price that you want to get to, right? So then you're having a conversation. Now, you may not sell the extra 100, but hopefully you've been trained enough and you've got the skill set enough to be able to maybe at least get the other 50. So now the customer's ordered 150, you're at the red price. which essentially means the gross margin dollars are equal to the green price at quantity of 100. So you haven't lost any gross margin dollars on that particular line item, right? So very incremental. It's incredibly powerful, and it provides your sellers with insights and guidance on how to upsell, how to negotiate, and how to start to minimize gross margin loss on an invoice or line item basis. Next concept, please. We're going to talk about the contextualized guidance. So the data points represented in the chart are baked into the recommendations and are visible in the quote entry screens, right? So all of these things that you see here, both customer segment, customer size, the customer handle index that we talked about, product attributes, right? What's the core status of the product? Is it a core A or a non-core D? What's the product group visibility, right? What's the availability? If you have one left on the shelf and a customer is trying to get it for nothing or below red pricing, why would you want to do that? And especially if he needs it that afternoon or the next day, then I got one, but here's the price. So all this information, all this guidance is provided to you at the quote entry screen. So what does it really mean? It's real-time price recommendations based on customer and product sensitivity. So it takes the guesswork out of pricing. It's good, better, best pricing recommendations, which provide flexibility and ensure real-time approvals, right? Speed to quote that we've been talking about. It's the direct ERP integration, which creates live quotes in your system within seconds. Easily select the appropriate price and build out the rest of the quote utilizing the robust features of WebPresented's quoting features, or quoting module. It's accessible on a smartphone, tablet, or desktop. So if you're an outside salesperson, you're sitting in the lobby of your customer, you can easily start working on the quote or do the quote. Or if you're sitting in your office on your desktop, you can do it there as well. And then ultimately what it does is it empowers your sales reps with market-aligned, optimized pricing recommendations and recommendations that they start to have faith in. And again, we work with lots of different distributors, and as they go through what we call a profit journey, and as they go through that journey, the number one thing that we discover in the beginning of that journey is for a variety of reasons. Something like 70 to 80% of sales reps do not believe the price that is provided to them is the right price. Now, again, you can imagine some of that is good, some of that's bad, some of that is accurate, some of that is not accurate. Some of it is just salespeople think that they know the price of every single item to every single customer and all that stuff. So there's a lot of things that are baked into that. But when you start to share and explain why that's good price and why it makes sense, then they start to understand and they start to have belief in it. Next slide, please. So as we look at this slide, again, a lot of these things, a lot of these points we've already talked about, but suffice to say that by having your sales rep focusing on green, yellow, red pricing, it allows sales leadership to start focusing on the right behaviors for their sales force by positioning conversations around green, yellow, red. And this is very important. And removing or starting to eliminate conversations on cost of goods or gross margin percent, right? That's primarily the foundation for most quotations that are done today. And we all know that every sales rep has their own proprietary, if you will, for lack of a better description, or favorite gross margin percent. Every salesperson. We've done thousands of scatter plots, and by company and by sales rep, and I can tell you in a heartbeat what is a sales rep's preferred gross margin percent. And here's another factor. It always ends in zeros and fives. It's never 32.3. It's always 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30, which leads me to believe and confirms the fact that they really don't understand the market price, and they just have a gross margin percent that they like to use. And a lot of times when quoting, sales reps will use that favorite gross margin percent across all products and across all customers. irregardless of product sensitivity or customer sensitivity, which of course leaves lots of money into most companies, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on it, right? So ultimately, we believe clients should tie, as I've talked about before, sales rep commissions to the pricing decisions sales reps are making. So green prices, as an example, have very different commission percentages versus yellow or red. And what that's enabling the sales force to do ultimately is to migrate their behavior away from cost plus or gross margin percent thinking, essentially showing prices primarily according to their performance against a standard that is not tied to margin percent or cost plus or cost of goods. A lot of sales folks, for a lot of well-intentioned reasons, I guess, at least to them anyway, you start getting above 30 or 35, and depending on your industry, maybe 40% gross margin, and they start breaking down hives, and they just think it's immoral, and it just isn't the case. Obviously, as a company, if you want to get a blended average of 20 or 25% gross margin, you need to have products selling at 70 and 80 and 100%, because you also have products that are selling at 6, 7, 8, and 10. It takes a lot of volume to actually get to that blended average, and a lot of sales reps don't understand that. Next slide. I think we've talked a lot about this one. You have one after this one, James? Yes, let's go to this one. We already talked a lot about that other one, so let's just go to this one. And I'll wrap it up from here, and then we can get into the demo. I could talk forever. People are going to start to fall asleep here shortly. So here's what it is. So salespeople can access, smart, optimized pricing while using the web-presented price banding quote feature. Furthermore, with price banding, it enables the sales management team, as I talked about before, to set boundaries around pricing, specifically around discretion. Right? What is the behavior of the sales rep? What are they doing? So SPARXiQ, green, yellow, red pricing analytics are presented within the salesperson's workflow, which is very beneficial, right? They don't have to go to 15 different places to get the information. And in doing so, it cuts down a lot of the wasted time by the sales team calling into branch managers or sales leaders seeking pricing approvals or guidance. Especially as relates to you've got some newer folks coming in that are getting into the inside sales arena. Probably aren't taking new folks and putting them in outside sales, but you might be migrating them from a branch counter to an inside sales role. And as they do that, what's happened is a lot of those folks get their behaviors from the person next to them, right? Either at the counter or the desk next to them from inside sales. That's generally how a lot of salespeople learn in our industry, in our industrial B2B industry. They learn from the person next to them. And consequently, they get a lot of bad behaviors. And what price banding does is start to change those behaviors, number one, but also number two is for new folks entering the industry and for new folks that are into sales, it provides the contextualized guidance to them and really starts to put guardrails and parameters up around what they can and cannot do. And again, we can talk about user authorizations within the quoting module, but you could take new folks and say, all right, your only ability is to pick green, yellow, and red. You don't have any ability to at a different price, do markup, or do any other stuff. And then as you have perhaps more experienced folks, then perhaps they have some additional latitude. But I don't know, in my 30 some odd years of doing this, I usually find that the less experienced a salesperson is, the higher the margin they make, and the more experienced they are, the more they think they know, and the less margin that they make. So it's probably needs to work in reverse. But anyway, that's a story for a different day. So in ending, let's kind of recap some of the quantifiable benefits of the price bands, right? So number one, it provides smart guardrails to the sales team, which gives them flexibility, right, to grow top line revenue, but also the discipline around their pricing standards. So when should they make exceptions and when should they not make exceptions? Provide sales leaders with information and insights and quick views of when people are deviating and when they're not. And then with that information, you can start to have conversations around change management. It provides negotiation intelligence, which again is displayed dynamically. So the sales reps see how much extra volume they need to sell to generate the same gross margin dollars. You start to remediate some of that whale curve of those losing invoices. Financially impact. So what we find is companies increase gross margin averages between 100 to 200 basis points. That doesn't sound like a lot. And you can calculate this on your own. Just take what's your percentage of volume that's actually quoted. Maybe you want to subtract out the large quotations again that may or may not be impacted, even though some of this still impacts the large quotations. Because what we know is that even on large quotations, there's a certain bill of material on there that doesn't, that is in smaller quantities and maybe added to the large bill of material, but doesn't have to be priced the same way, right? So it's still going to have some impact of that. But anyway, take your quotations, you can do the math, figure out what the potential impact is. We're in a nickel dime business. At least most distributors are in a nickel dime business. I don't know too many that are making more than maybe 400, 500 EBIT. If you are, fantastic. But most, the average is about 3 to 4 basis points of EBIT. So there's a opportunity here to grab some incremental margin by using price bandings. Increased revenue certainly is part of it. Provides pricing guidelines, right? By SPARXiQ, right? We're the industry leader in analytics, and all this is shown dynamically within the quoting module. It's immediate real-time approvals, so there's no going to, I have to pick up the phone and talk to 3 people, say, hey, can I quote this? What's the recommended price? So, back in my day, we used to have our inside sales team. Sometimes they were in a box to do that. They'd have to call 2 or 3 people to get some approvals and say, hey, where do you want this price to be? Your sales reps no longer have to do that. Improve negotiation skills, right? So we start to teach them about negotiations, and we start to teach them and give them insights about what they should be asking for. Improve sales rep reliance on data. So as they start to get comfortable with this and they start to see it and understand it, then they start to have more reliance on the data that's provided through their regular ERP system, right? It's all integrated anyway. But I mean, as they're entering either an order or some other function within the ERP system, they start to rely more on the data because they know that they can trust it, right? It starts to eliminate a lot of the cost plus quoting practices, which is very important. And one of the things I always try to drive home with sales folks is that there's no correlation between cost of goods and market price. There's zero correlation there. Even though we like to draw that direct line, there's zero correlation because a lot of distributors have a different cost of goods on the same product than distributor A versus distributor B. And there's absolutely no correlation specifically, because of that reason, but also because of customer type and size. A lot of times, salespeople think that gross margin dollars are created equal across the platform, and that just is not the case. 25% gross margin to customer A has a far different net profit impact than 25% gross margin to customer B. One could be a loser, one could be a winner. You just don't know when you're quoting this thing. So not all gross margin dollars are created equal. So if you can eliminate the cost plus quoting, if you can eliminate the fear by showing gross margin percent and by salespeople reacting to gross margin percent, then you start going a long ways towards getting to that 200 basis points pickup instead of the 100 basis points pickup. Direct ERP integration, and then again, we provide or represented through their module provides fantastic intelligence, AI intelligence around cross-sell recommendations based on customer type, size, and history. So that's pretty much it. I've gone on longer than I should have, but hopefully we've all learned a thing or two today and have a better understanding of what SPARXiQ Price Bands in conjunction with Represented Quoting Module offers, what it does, and a little bit of the intelligence behind it. So with that, James, I'll hand it back over to you, and maybe we can walk through a demo.
Yeah, well, thank you, Greg. Thanks very much. That was very informative, very thorough, and hopefully that gave our attendees a good understanding about how the smarts that goes on behind the scenes. Certainly great information for myself in terms of understanding some of the science that goes into coming up with accurate pricing. So what I'm going to do now is jump over to a demo system and just show you SPARXiQ's price bands in action alongside WPCRM's quoting environment. So I'll take you through a couple of examples, and this will only take 5 or 10 minutes because it's so simple to use. It's so simple that really there's not a whole lot of screen interaction. But if I start out with a typical sales reps dashboard, I'm going to go ahead and click on a customer here, a customer with a pretty poor health score, and I'm going to look at ways of growing business with this particular customer. So oftentimes what we'll do is take a look and encourage our sales reps to look at a customer's scorecard, and then jump over to our suggested products section, which is basically a way that a salesperson can take a look at a customer's purchases and then marry that set of customer purchases up alongside what other similar customers are buying. So it gives them recommendations of the types of products that this customer might be interested in. And this, obviously, if I highlight some products here, it's a great starting point to start a quote. So in terms of looking for new business, our analytics is a great way to take, in this case, 4 products that this customer, we believe they could be interested in purchasing. I click on the Create New Quote button, and then a new quote's generated for this customer using those line items that we talked about. Now, several of you, if you're existing quoting users, are going to be more familiar with this list view of our system. A new release of WPCRM now allows for the same type of data entry, but in grid format, so we can update pricing and update quantities, etc., in bulk as we go along. Some other new features of our quoting tool is a more robust product search. So for example, if I can go to the product search screen, you'll see here that I can now generate a listing of products based on attributes, or in this case, based on product groupings. I can search for a specific customer based on their purchase history, as well as customer part numbers, even advanced search filters like do we have products in stock, and based on price thresholds. Once I run a search, it's going to bring me back my listing of products, and I can cherry pick items from this list, or even select a range of items from this list, and quickly and easily add bulk items into my quote. And obviously in this case, I'm going to go out and add 7 items to my quote. Each one's going to be validated against the ERP system, and you can see here now that we're building out a larger quote with now 11 items on the quote. Few features before I get into the price band that you might not be aware of is within our grid view, of course, it works very much like a spreadsheet. So all of these columns can be sorted. We can update, we can group items directly from within this particular view. The capability allows us to, for example, export items to Excel and paste large items in. So in case it was like an order pad, we could paste items. So let's go ahead and generate some more items here and just show you how easy it is to paste products into our quote. Let's take some part numbers here and simply copy and paste them into our quote. And you can see how easy it is to import and update line items very quickly just by using copy-paste functions, just like you would in a spreadsheet. And of course, the system goes out to the ERP system and gets pricing on each one of these as we go. Built into our new version of WPCRM is the ability to have contextual product suggestions. So just like you would, for example, on Amazon.com, based on the current basket, based on the current shopping cart, our system can go out and understand what other products are typically purchased alongside these items that are in our basket. So it gives me contextual suggestions and recommendations for items to add. Great examples are here if you buy a piece of equipment and maybe there's an extended warranty that we might be interested in selling. And of course, as I update those items, as I add those items, the AI behind the scenes goes ahead and improves the algorithm so it knows which products typically work well together. Now, one very important piece that you're seeing as I add items to my quote, whether it's in this grid view or in the line item view, is the pricing information is all coming in as green items. And you'll notice if I hover over one of those prices, it actually tells us what are the levels of SPARXiQ price bands according to each item for this customer. So traditionally, historically, we would come into this quote, we would look up an item, and the system would give us what's called the system price. In other words, the price that comes out of the ERP system. But to Greg's points that he made, sometimes that price isn't always the most profitable price for our business. Maybe there's a high visibility or a low visibility item. Maybe we know that this particular customer, we can make more margin. And so that price optimization algorithm goes into play. And the price that comes into quote is going to be the green price, that recommended price that SPARXiQ is telling us. Now, of course, if the salesperson wants to make a modification, they can, of course, come in here and use a traditional margin percent model. But by clicking on edit line item, you'll see here that the price bands are integrated within the system. So by default, we're getting the green band. But let's just say we know that this customer, that's going to be a tough sell to get that one. So let's go ahead and go back to the yellow option, this fallback level. Remember, this is still a good price. We still know based on the simple color coding that the hard decision making's already been done behind the scenes. Of course, once I update that price, the price is going to be updated on our quote, and now I can see at a quick glance what's the general KPI, red, yellow, green, for the items within this quote. And of course, if you really did want to look at the margin levels, let's say I reduce this to a 25% margin, I'm still within the yellow price band. So again, it's an immediate response, immediate reaction to understand how the impact of any changes I make to the pricing is going to impact whether or not that's still a recommended price or not. Using our other traditional way of adding items to this quote, of course, I could do the exact same calculations in my list view. In this particular case, I'll go ahead and choose go back to the yellow price here and update and close. So it all works exactly the same as it did before. This one looks like it's in the red. No, let's go change this one to the green band. And of course, that's going to update the pricing accordingly on the quote. We still have the same capabilities built into WPCRM as we always have, the ability to download these items, the ability to add multiple, for example, multiple price breaks, the ability to build workflows in behind the scenes within our quote. But to Greg's point, the difficult science of coming up with pricing is already done, and it's made very, very simple for the end user. Greg, is there anything else you wanted me to add in terms of demonstrating the price bands in action?
No, I think you did, as always, a fantastic job. I think the only thing I'll add, which I failed to do before, is just the relationship, which I think is important, between the margin of an item and the break-even point, right? So if you can maybe go into and back into an item, and
Sure.
let's take a look at the item, let's take a look at the banding, and you can see here where it gives you the break-even. Again, I understand it's small, but you can see with the yellow price, it's a 56% break-even. Now, it happens to be quantity of one, right? So if they can get the customer to buy two, because you're not going to buy probably 1.5, right? So you can get the customer to buy two, then your gross margin dollars are the same. And the point there is that you're going to see some of these where you've got a 50% break even in yellow, and some you may actually see at 100 or 200%, and some you may see at 10%. So there's a direct correlation between the cost of the gross margin of a product and its break-even point. So the lower the gross margin percent, the higher the quantity is going to be needed for the break-even. And then conversely, the higher the gross margin of a product, the lower the break-even volume is going to be. And so I just wanted to kind of just state that as well. But other than that, no, this is fantastic. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. So So that wraps up the demo portion of today's webinar. We do have about 9 or 10 minutes left, and I'm going to turn it over to any of the attendees. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you have questions, please enter them into the chat window from within the WebEx. Amanda is managing that list of questions, and she's going to prepare any questions that come in and read them out. And both Greg or I are going to do our best to answer any of those questions that come in. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat window now. Amanda, do we have any questions already, or should we give people a few moments to come up with any questions?
Hi, James. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Yes, we do have a couple questions that came through while you were talking. So I'll go through, start asking those, and then if any others come through, we can get to them when they're entered. So okay, for the first question, when looking at the price bands within the quote, is there a way to create an approval process if a user is trying to select a yellow or red price?
Yes. So yeah, that's built into Web Presenter's workflows, is the ability to have a approval process. So historically, historically we use approvals at a product item class or product category level, or at a user level, and those what we call price floors or price ceilings are usually at a gross margin level. In other words, James could go into a quote and he could enter items fine, but if he goes below a specific margin level, then it's going to kick off an email to James's manager and request approval. And he's going to probably have to give a price justification reason as to why we're going below that threshold, that price floor. We do have the ability to build the exact same type of workflow and approval process using price bands. So instead of looking at margins, we could see, a particular user might have to get approval to go to yellow, to red, or even to yellow price bands within the system. And it's very easy to manage that approval process. Greg, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add on that one.
No, it's a great question. Yeah. Nope, that's perfect.
Great. Thank you, James. And the next one, with this functionality, would we be able to generate a report that details what percentage of quotes or quote lines that fall in each band?
Oh, good question. So, yeah, we've talked about that actually with the SPARXiQ folks in terms of classifying entire quotes in green, yellow, and red. Right now, obviously, the categorization of the banding goes in the at the line item level. But let's say there's a mixture of yellow, red, and green pricing on a single quote. What's the overall band for that quote? We have not yet come up with a single solution for that question. It's a great question, but I'm sure Greg and the SPARXiQ team would have recommendations at a quote level on, what constitutes recommended pricing for an entire quote. Greg, do you have anything else to add on that one?
No, other than I think the ability to see, start to identify patterns with sales reps in terms of what pricing they kind of default to is important. And so let me ask this question, and I don't know the answer to it. By sales rep, we can run a report out of here by sales rep, can't we, on a line item basis?
Absolutely. Yep, yeah. We can see which line item sales reps, and we can even see which band they're selling at or they're quoting at. So in other words, like number of line items in green, number of line items yellow, and red by sales rep.
Yeah, so I think that information is important, and starting to identify where do certain sales reps need help and guidance. Probably more so than on an even order basis, but you can quickly see on the order itself. But in terms of reporting, I think being able to identify which sales reps have a tendency to go to yellow and red very quickly versus those who don't. That's important.
Great. Just a few minutes left, and we had another question. can you still do manual pricing, such as gross margin or markup?
Yeah, so absolutely, either in the grid view, they can optionally still use markup or margin. In fact, if I open up one of these lines, you'll notice it's now hidden by default if we're using price bands, but there is a section here that says manual pricing. And so if I chose not to want to use any of these price bands, you'll see the more traditional WP quoting mechanism here. So for example, I could choose a margin calculation of 25%. And it would then give me the updated price, and I can easily see, okay, this one's still going to be in the yellow band at that particular margin. So yes, we do still provide access to that, but the fact that it's hidden by default is obviously that sort of pushing the salesperson to get out of that cost plus mentality that Greg talks about. And we want them to trust the green, yellow, and red system, so not to have to do too many of those calculations themselves.
Great. We had one other question come through. Can the admin get a copy of a quote so it can be approved before submitting to the end user?
Yes, yeah. So we can put in a workflow in places at the point where it's being sent. In those cases, then it's usually a sales manager would have the final approval. They would receive an email that has a link in the email. That the link would contain the quote as an attachment. The quote would actually have, we've had customers that have a watermark over the quote that says draft, so that they can't download, so the sales rep can't download it and send it outside of the system. And then the manager would have to then click on a link to approve, and then assuming it's approved, the quote would then automatically go out to the customer. The sales rep wouldn't need any more intervention. If it's not approved, then the quote goes back to draft status. The sales rep gets a notification to say why it was not approved, and they basically have to then go and modify the pricing and try and reapply for approval, or just send it out at the manager's recommendation.
All right, thank you, James.
Okay.
And it looks like that wraps it up for the questions right now. So thank you, James and Greg. If there's anything else that you want to add before we end this webinar?
No, be safe.
James, anything?
No, I'm good.
Great. Yeah, again, to echo James, be safe, and hopefully this all passes fairly quickly here, and we can get everybody back to work, and everybody stay healthy. Take care.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.